Welcome to Clay's Cortex.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to episode number 14 of Clay's Cortex, the podcast. And the past couple weeks, we've been talking about related to sports or injuries and so forth, and I want to kind of keep that going. Right, I think there's one more piece of the puzzle we got to go over. And if you follow on Instagram, which if you just type in Clay's Cortex, it'll pop up. You'll see the brain drawing. Follow it, right? That'd be great. You'll see clips of things that are coming up this week on the podcast, so forth. I'm gonna start posting more about infographics and so forth from other people that I think are contributing great information related to what we're gonna be talking about on the podcast. But also along that too, I'm gonna start doing more Q&As so you guys get more involved, so we can talk about topics you guys want to hear about. So what we're gonna be talking about today is, in this episode number 14 of Clay's Cortex is called "I'm Cleared, Now What?" Right? And that's a big one, right? So if you look at the last couple of episodes, the one was about sports specialization. So, one sport versus multiple sports was the one podcast. Then the last one we did with Josh Fitch, which he was awesome on there. He talked about his journey in exercise and with his injuries and so forth, and the three components that are crucial in preventing as best as possible injuries, which is strength training, recovery, and then being able to control your body in space, spatial awareness, right? Skill acquisition. Can you skip? Can you run? Can you do things in multiple different ways versus just one way? And so that was a really good podcast. So if you go back and listen to those, listen to that. Now we're going to talk about, you've had an injury, I'm going to walk through the sequence of that and how that kind of looks in a couple different scenarios. So what I'm going to get into is, you've had an injury. Now you've got these steps. How do you get your body back on track to where it was? The hard part is if you've had an actual legit injury somewhere, and what I mean by legit is it's diagnosis. You've broken elbow, you tore a ligament, you've got something diagnosed, there's material damage to your body, right? That's a big thing to keep in mind. So what happens is, or the sequence of how this goes is, you've got pain. Then people go to the doctor refers you to somewhere else. It might be PT. If you've got like back pain, they might refer you need some physical therapy, go there. And then from there, the PT might be like, all right, you're cleared, go back to your activity, right? I think there's a gap in between that is what I'm saying, right, with this entire podcast. So if I use another example of that, college, right? So I played sports in college. I played a sport in college. I played baseball. And so how it kind of worked through the system was, in baseball, if you had an injury, you would go to your athletic trainer, right, or ATC. They're certified. The high schools around here have them at each high school. We've been trying to connect with them. They're doing an awesome job. They do a really good job of maintaining and helping take care of people's bodies, especially the athletes. So the athlete has an injury or a tweak or something like that. They go to the ATC. The ATC checks them out. They might do some rehab stuff, or I guess you call it prehab. And then if it doesn't get better, they'll refer out to a specialist or a doctor. The doctor then does what they need to do. They'll assess them. They'll maybe do some scans, whether it's an X-ray, MRI, whatever it might be, a liquid injection to kind of light that area up to see if anything's torn, blah, 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 blah. And then from there, they might prescribe, or hey, you diagnosis, you've got a torn something, you need surgery, or you've got a broken bone, you need a cast. And then from that, once you do that and we heal for a certain specified amount of time, you then need to go to rehab/physical therapy. You've got to go to physical therapy. They will get you back to where you are. You go to physical therapy, then you're cleared. Then then it's like, then what? Right? So if you get back to that, the great thing is then the ATC at the college takes over with like a throwing program for baseball, or if it's an ACL tear, some agility stuff, easing into it, right? Controlling the dosage of how much they do over time. What I've found though, if you're outside of that scenario at a college, is that people will go to physical therapy like, you're cleared, good, go about your day, do your thing. And that's when some things start to cause issues, and that's what that whole entire "now what" is in the title of this podcast. Again, the podcast is "I'm cleared from my injury, now what?" So we're going to talk about the now what. I think that the now what is to find an exercise professional that is highly qualified to check in on your system with exercise. Now, the hard part is when you say like, oh yeah, I'm going to go find a highly qualified individual that's an exercise professional, strength coach, whatever it is, to take care of my system and progress me past this. Because if you go from "I'm cleared" back to sport, there's a huge gap in between that, right? There's a huge gap of like, well, I've been doing no training, I haven't been throwing a ball, or I haven't been jumping, and now I'm just cleared, I'm ready to go. You got to ease back into that in a strategic manner. So finding a highly qualified exercise professional is is tough, right? Like, oh, I'm gonna go find that. Well, the thing is for consumers is how do you know what a highly qualified exercise professional, trainer, strength coach, muscle system specialist, whatever that is, how do you know whether they're good at that? Well, I did a video, and I will link that in the show notes about, and I used to do a vlog, I don't do it anymore. There was a couple episodes, I thought it was going okay, but I think the podcast is a better way to go. Kind of hits, we can just talk, kind of go from there. But it talks about, the title of it's called Interviewing Your Trainer, or How to Interview Your Trainer, right? And so it's on YouTube, I'll link it in the show notes. But I think that's crucial. You've got to interview and see, one, whether you're a good fit for them, if you agree with their philosophy and how they go about things, and so forth, right? So like, here, for example, if somebody's had an injury to the elbow, we know that there's say it's a elbow, or say it's a humerus fracture, right? I fracture my humerus, right? Which is, the upper part of your arm, that bone, right? And I said that because I actually cracked mine when I was in 8th grade. So humerus, right? So my journey with that, I had to hold it up in a sling, no cast, because the cast would kind of pull down on it and not let the bone heal. So I had to keep it in a sling, chill out. Once it got, once it healed, they checked again. Oh yeah, you're cleared, you're good to go. And I literally went back to sport. I did no PT, any of that. And this was when I was in 8th grade. Again, I'm 32 now, so I was like, 13, 14 then. So, things have probably changed a lot now. But I went back to sport. Now, looking back at it, I wish I would have done some exercise to ease back into that, because I've got some size differerences, and I can feel a difference in like where the bone healed in my humerus. It didn't crack all the way through or break all the way through, otherwise I probably had surgery. It was a little crack, right? That thing hurt a little bit. I thought I dislocated my shoulder from thinking about it. Sorry, anyway. But yeah, so then I was just right back into sport. I was clear. I was like, okay, I can go play baseball. I was so sore after my first day. Swinging a bat, throwing a ball, and it was my non-throwing arm. I was like, holy cow. Now, from that, what was interesting is I remember that like my trap started getting tight, right? My lats started getting tight on my non-throwing arm, and that's what I want to kind of go over next, is that I drew this drawing right here. So if you're watching this, I drew this drawing of essentially a brain, some lungs, and then I've got some kidneys, a liver, and then feet, eyeballs, and so forth, and then I got a circulatory system. If you're looking at this, there's a bunch of blue arrows or lines that I did, and that's just depicting that our body is a complex system that is woven together. So if I break that down as an analogy or realness, we start out as one cell, right? Two cells that merge together. Your parents, boom, they made you within the womb, right? Boom, and then we grew from there. We were woven together. We were grown together. It wasn't like, oh, it's week 5 of you being in the stomach, add an arm. Add the right arm, add the left arm, add this. We're not put together at pieces, we're kind of grown together. So if I have an injury to my, like I said, humerus, that can impact not just this area that it is, it can impact my spine, it can impact my neck, it can impact my feet, how I control my body, especially with the sport that I was playing, right? So your body can be impacted throughout the entire system of your body from an injury to one area. Let me give you an example of that. So if you look at, like, we've got lights on here at the gym. We're at the kiln, and we're hooked up to the power grid, right? So if you think about it, say there's a windstorm here in Seattle, outside the Seattle area, which it gets a little windy. There's a lot of trees here in Woodinville, and that might be a joke or a pun. Maybe there was a lot of woods here, so they called it Woodinville. I don't know. But the tree falls down, takes out a power line. It may only impact a certain section, but it impacts that section where you hit it. Now, if we potentially hit, if it comes out on a power line that is connected or is kind of like a hub to multiple locations of Woodinville, we can lose power on a bigger scale. And that's like an injury to your body. If you have an injury to your foot, that can impact the entire system. If you have an injury to your, say you're not breathing very well, that can impact your entire system. If I have an eye injury, that can impact your entire system. So we want to kind of get that across to where it's like your body is interconnected and woven together. And I think that working with somebody that understands the whole body is connected, especially from training wise, the mechanical side, everything's connected, and nervous system wise, everything's connected, you will get better results. But then how do you know if somebody's viewing that way? You got to interview them, right? And I'll talk about that, or in that video it talks about that. So you've got to find somebody that's going to look at the body that way. Not just, oh, your knee hurts, I'm just going to look at your knee. Oh, your foot hurts, I'm just going to look at your foot. We're going to be careful around your foot. Well, here's the thing that's interesting, right? Is if somebody comes to a trainer and say, hey, my knee hurts, and then all of a sudden what traditionally exercise professionals or trainers do is if something hurts, they don't do it, right? Which is not a bad thing to do. But what you do over that time is you build, or you start to diminish the amount of capacity or strength that area of the body has and how it helps the rest of the system. Because we've all heard the saying, you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? We've all heard that. So if your weak link is your knees and you try to prevent doing anything through your knees, that's going to really impact the rest of your system. It's going to impact your back. You might have back pain because if you don't want to absorb force through the knees, what's the next thing that's going to take that? Your hips and your low back, right? Or maybe your feet. So you might have issues. So it's going to deviate out from there. And I guess what's cool about that is the body is so amazingly it's amazing, essentially. It works together. If there's an issue somewhere, it can compensate to keep you going, which is really cool. Now, when you're cleared and you want to go work with an exercise professional, somebody that's highly qualified, you've got to go interview them and see if they're going to be a good fit for you and the philosophy of how you view your body. And is that going to be a way to help you get better from this, right? So if I look at that back to the college scenario or non-college scenario, somebody gets hurt, they go to PT, they're done, they're cleared, they go back to activity. Well, there's a huge gap there, right? There's a huge gap. If I take a stress fracture, this is another example. If I take a stress fracture, for example, if somebody's got a stress fracture in their back, the spinal erector muscles are more of a endurance type muscle, right? And traditionally, now you can train them to be more of a power muscle, whatever it is, but it's an endurance type muscle. It holds us up when standing, bending over. We move and rotate. They're being used to some degree all the time. Well, when you have an injury to an area of that body, the rest of the body is going to potentially compensate, say in the stress fracture scenario, and not allow you to put as much force or stress through that area of the body. So now, physiologically, the type of muscle, it being an endurance muscle, turns into more of a power muscle and doesn't have as much endurance, which, if you look at some exercises that you do, if you do like 1 to say 5 reps, and you're like, oh, I got that down. Well, if you go walk around, you're doing more than that many reps, right? So then all of a sudden you go for a walk, like, oh, my back hurts. What the heck? I was cleared. Well, you miss that gap of training endurance through that area of your body in an appropriate manner, right? And that concept was brought to me by, and I'll link him in the show notes. His name's Jacques Taylor. And I want to say it's Jacques Henri Taylor, right? And he runs Myotopia, and I love Jacques. He's brilliant. He's been posting more on Instagram, and it's great. He studies the nervous system, but he brought that concept to me of like, if you have an issue or an injury to that area of the body, the physiological making up of that body can go from, say, endurance to power, but if you need it to be an endurance muscle, that's not good for the health of your system, right? So we've got 3 different types of energy systems in our body. We've got ATP-PC, which is like the first initial bout. We've got glycolytic, which is kind of that mix between endurance and the initial bout. And we've got Krebs cycle, which is like people would say, oh, I got to my fat burning heart rate. That's where I got to be. And so those energy systems are always working all the time. Just the degree of how you're using them or how much degree or percentage of how much they're being used can vary depending on the activity that you do. It can depend on the amount of load you're putting through that tissue and so forth. Now, working with an exercise professional, they would understand that. They would understand, okay, this person had, in this scenario, a stress fracture. PT's cleared them, they're moving really well. How do we load them appropriately with the amount of reps, the amount of weight, to make sure we're building this up and going from there? So they're continuing to progress towards not letting this come back and come back. Now, along with that too, we've got to check in with that exercise professional. I think what's crucial about that, checking back in, or if they're like, hey, you look good, go check back in with your PT, do a check-in with them, see how they're doing, right? So if I'm talking about that, if you drive, right, or you're like, man, I hope I can drive a car one day. When you drive a car one day, there's major responsibilities with driving a car, right? You got to fill it up with gas. You've got to, you'll drive it. You got to take care of the tires, check the tire pressure, all that kind of stuff. You're checking in, but then every couple months, you're going to bring it in and have an oil change. It's going to get checked up on by a mechanic who's professional. They're certified and really good at this and checking on your car, see if the oil levels are good, everything's lubricated, the tires are aligned, is the tire pressure good? They're doing that extra check, right? And so with that being said, you do that to check in to make sure your car is running, well, that it can continue to run well, right? The same thing should be with exercise if you use your body on a regular basis, which all of us do. I'm using it by talking right now, right? If I play sports or work out or whatever it is, you should go to somebody that's going to check in on your body, right? And hopefully they do a very thorough assessment like we do here at the Kiln or Curtis Clay Training. We do a 2-part assessment. Part 1 is collecting information, seeing how you move, so forth, to build a plan for you where we need to go. And then we will communicate with your medical providers to communicate you on the same page to make sure you're progressing the way that you want to progress, to get back to your sport, get back to activity that you do, playing with your grandkids, whatever that may be. Now, we have to understand, or you guys got to understand, that it's hard to find a qualified exercise professional that's going to listen to you. That's a tough thing, right? So the now what aspect is you might have to put some work in to find one that's going to mesh well with you. Somebody that's going to be honest with you and shoot you straight with like, hey, this is where you're at based off the assessment, and we've got to get you back to this if this is what you want to do. If you want to get back to squatting a barbell, we've got to figure out, can your spine control that? I'm not going to put somebody on that right away, especially with somebody that's had a back injury. I probably wouldn't do that. I'd probably load the hips differently, train the spine differently, but I'm not going to put a bar directly on their back to get back to that, even if they want to. And that's a hard thing to comprehend, because once you're cleared through PT and stuff, to just put a bar on your back, once you're cleared and the bone's healed, why would you just put that storm back on them, right? You've got to be thoughtful and mindful as an exercise professional, but that's why you as the consumer need to interview somebody, so that you don't need to go back through this entire journey of I'm hurt again, to check with a PT, then go to a doctor, scans again, I'm hurt again, I got to start all over. So how can we catch that and keep you progressing to monitor your system? We'll find an exercise professional that's going to be that now what step of maintaining your body. That's hard to find, right? What I thought was interesting, right, is that Eric Cressy did this post. Let me pull this up. So I think, yeah, here it is. So he did this post or a tweet, and he said, Eric Cressy, and I'll link this too, he said, don't take a fitness solution to a fatigue problem. And what he meant by that was, and what I gathered from that was that if you've got an issue with recovery, with whatever it is you're hurt, you gotta rest. You've gotta recover. Don't do more work to help that injury when all you need to do is rest and recover, right? That's a part of being strategic, and that's something that an exercise professional will work with you too. How often should you see them? How often should you train? How often should you train without them? They're gonna be honest with you about that to make sure that we're training the energy systems and your structures as best as possible to help you progress so that you don't go backwards, right? So, with that being said, there's a massive gap. I've said this already. There's a massive gap between being cleared and going back to activity. I believe here at Curtis Clay Training, we can help fill that gap, and so can the Muscle System Specialist Program through Exercise Professional Education, or finding a quality exercise professional that knows, okay, this is where the person's at, this is where they want to be. Let's ease that, let's shrink that gap before they get back to activity, because if we can shrink that gap, and then once you're back to activity, then check in, we can prevent these injuries from popping back up as best as possible. And that's what most people want, right? Let's be real right now. Nobody wants to get hurt. Nobody wants to say they've got an injury. Nobody wants to get sick, all this kind of stuff. But there are ways to prevent that, right? There's ways to essentially check in on your system to make sure it's doing better. And I'm talking about this from a mechanical standpoint with your body and moving and so forth, right? I'm not talking about sickness, like, taking your vitamins. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when it comes to training. So sports specialization can play a big factor in at a young age in causing injuries down the road. Spinal injuries with rotational athletes, so forth, at a young age or their developing years. That's where I think exercise or working with an exercise professional can help fill that gap, to prevent that, to mitigate those injuries from popping up, to help using the weight room as a way to, make your body as dynamic and robust as possible. Going off of that, let me use another quote. Hey guys, sorry, the battery on my camera died. Technology. Anyways, back to it. So this is how I view the weight room. And Cressy did this post, and it said, the weight room isn't just about lifting. It's also a chance for skill acquisition / refinement. Find a pattern and load it to make it stick. So the whole point of the weight room training is to help prevent and get your body to move as best as possible, so that when you go to play your sport, you have the skill and capacity to control your body through spinal rotation, to prepare your body for the stresses of playing your sport in general, whatever it may be, rotation, throwing, jumping, whatever it is. That's the beauty of the weight room, is we can use that as a way to prepare your body for the stresses it's gonna do on a regular basis. So I think that's something that's really cool about the weight room, and I believe that now what step, that gap, even if you're healthy and you're playing a sport and you ramp things up, to find somebody that's qualified, highly qualified, again, watch the video, it's gonna be linked, that can help maintain your system through the sport that you play, right? Because if you playing a sport's like driving the car, who's the mechanic that's checking in on it, right? Who's checking in on your muscular system and control of your body and telling you, hey, you know what? you're really tired. Let's just chill for a bit, right? Can you take a week off from playing your sport? Yeah, I can. Chill. Go do some other sports. Go for a walk. Go hiking. Go shoot some basketball in the backyard. Go play with your family. Go try something else and just relax. If you got somebody that can check in on your system to see how you're doing, that's gonna help mitigate these injuries too. And that's why I believe with this whole specialization in sports, I think strength training is gonna be the now what to help prevent these injuries from popping up. These adult type injuries happening to youth, or you as an adult. If you're doing, CrossFit, which is a lifting type sport, and you need somebody to check in on your system because you wanna go full speed, find somebody that can check in on your system, right? That's highly qualified. Interview that person. And ask them, hey, this is what I want out of this relationship. I want you to check in on my body, make sure we've got a baseline, and if this is what's going on, how can I go from there to make sure that I can keep doing the sport I want to do, or keep doing CrossFit, or I want to keep doing Tough Mudders or Spartan races or whatever it might be. You need somebody to check in on your system to make sure that you can keep doing those things. Now, I think the cool thing about that is that with that being the gap in the now what, through that process, you will become educated on how to take care of your body. And if you can learn how to take care of your body, not like everybody should do a squat like this, or everybody typically should do a lunge like this, how should you do it? How should your body move, right? What are some things that pop up for your body, because your body's unique, that when you get tired, your ankle starts to hurt, or say my calves get so sore because your hips got tired, now your calves are doing most of the work. What are some things you need to do on a regular basis, almost like brushing your teeth and flossing, to take care of your body to make sure it's doing very well and staying highly robust or active or dynamic? So with that being said, once you're cleared from injury, and then that now what, go find an exercise professional that's highly qualified, interview them, and then see if they're going to keep communication open with your or your medical professional. You want to keep that dialogue open so they will listen to that medical professional, work together from their viewpoint to say, hey, these are the steps I want to take with them. Do you agree with this? Do you not? Can we do this next? Blah, blah. Let's open up these dialogues to help people stay, as injury-free as possible, or come back from injury in a better manner than if they didn't. So hopefully this podcast, I would say this is probably the third installment when it came to sports specialization, to kids getting injuries, the pros and cons to, I have an injury or my kid keeps getting injured, with the next podcast. And then, what can I do? Here's some steps now to this. Once you do have an injury, which I hope you guys never have an injury that's diagnosed or whatever. And then how do I bounce back from that? Hopefully this podcast can help you understand that eliciting a highly qualified exercise professional that can look at your body mechanically and as a system that's intertwined, where that has different energy systems, can help your body stay healthy over time depending on what you want to do with your body. Because it's your body, you've got one of them, so let's take care of it as best as possible. So guys, thanks for listening to this podcast. Check it out on YouTube. It's also on Apple iTunes podcast, the app Podbean. I'll have it all linked. Thanks for listening. Curtis Clay, signing out.